Hey, this is James from All Hail Internal Combustion. What you see before you is our new John Deere STX38. Well, it's new to us. It's a 1988 to a 1993. I didn't look the exact year up, but that's when the yellow decks supposedly came out. I've worked on a lot of these through the years, and it's never really been anything major. And ours, unfortunately, the steering column got shattered in it when a screwdriver wedged itself in between the steering gears and broke everything in the plastic column. So this is its replacement. With them headlights, it kind of looks like a grasshopper or something. Weird little mower. But it's clean. It runs. It's got the Kohler 12.5 horse in it. And the amazing thing about this is that the hood actually isn't broken on it. These hoods are really hard to find because the way they mounted them, it just shatters. And then you end up with butchered hoods, which I'm sure eventually this one will be. But yeah, it starts, it runs fine. I need to check over all the fluids. The guy started it when I went and bought it. But I want to look it over before I do anything else. Problem with this thing is supposedly it won't go into gear with the engine running. And down here at the pedals, we got good old floppy pedal syndrome. And that's the clutch side. This is the brake side. I mean, obviously the brake needs to be adjusted or replaced. And I know a cheap way to replace the brakes on these things. You just take old brake shoes off of a car and you file little pucks off of them and you slap them in there and they do the same thing and you're not spending 20 bucks on brake pads. But I think the first thing we need to worry about is finding out what's going on with this clutch pedal and why it's not going into gear. I push it in gear and it turns everything. Transaxle seems smooth, like there's nothing broke in it. So I'm going to get this thing up in the air and take a look underneath. Alright, so figured out the problem with the STX38, why it wasn't going into gear. This is the clutch return spring. And as you can see right there, oh, it's kind of missing that end. And it's pretty much going. And this is the dry belt off of it. As you can see, it's cracked. It's messed up. It got stuck in a couple spots. There even might be pieces missing out of it. I'll try and get you a shot underneath the deck of this thing. These dry belts are a pain in the butt on some mowers. I'll get under there and show you some of the mess I had to go through to get this belt off and get the new one on. Okay, so here's a view from underneath of the motor. If you look back there, that's the transmission. So the belt wraps around the transmission, comes up here to these idler pulleys, and there's a guard around it. Then you got another idler pulley up here. This is the one that actually gets worked with the clutch pedal. So there's a spring attached to this. You pull the clutch pedal, it releases tension and the belt gets floppy so that way you don't go anywhere. And then that comes up and goes up to the engine. And there's a, really hard to see, but there's a pulley up there on the top. And this mechanism below it, that's the electric clutch for the deck drive. But in order to get this thing in here, I had to take both of these steering arms out. Guess we can back out a little bit here. I had to take both of the steering arms out because the belt goes over top of that. I had to take out my parking brake knob and pull that up out of the way. I had to take both of these guards off of it. And I did manage to fish it up over the transmission pulley without having to pull too much of that apart. So that is how I replaced the belt on this thing. Now another problem I'm having with this is my brakes weren't working. And I went in here, and that's the little baby brake rotors that I love so much on John Deere's. But this one is on here, and I found that rather than somebody replacing the shoes on it, they put plastic in there. So I've got some brake shoe material. I need to get a little PB blaster on here because this is supposed to be able to float in and out. So as your shoes wear down, this rotor will actually move in and out to take up the slack while you're making your adjustments on it. I need to get that cleaned off, get that rotor out of here. And I've got another rotor off of one of my old machines that I kept, and I also kept some brake shoe material. So I'll show you that. Okay, so this is a brake setup out of the John Deere. I'm not sure if other mowers have this kind of setup, but it's actually pretty cool. It's a baby disc brake system that clamps onto the transmission to keep it from spinning, locking the mower in place. This would be your caliper. It's a mechanical caliper. It has two little pins in there that when you rotate this lever, it pushes the pins in. So you got your little happy pins that go in here. Then there's usually a steel backing plate. And what I do is, if I get, sometimes you do brakes on a car and one side's really screwed up, and of course I do both sides, but I'll keep my thicker pads, and I keep them around, and I just run them on the bandsaw and take out material that I need to make these pads, because a pair of these pads, last time I looked them up online, was like 21 bucks. Just for two pieces of brake material that are cut just like this. Well, I shaved mine out of old car brakes. Saved myself a lot of money, and I mean, as you can see by this piece, I mean, hell, I could get 4, maybe 5 pads out of it. These are really small Ford Focus brakes, but yeah, so I make my own. And this is one off of a thicker pad that I replaced on something else, probably the F-150. But that's all I did was I take these and I cut them down, get them into the rough shape, put them on the bench grinder, get them to the correct size, and then all I got to do is drop that in there, and I've got brake material again. Now, unfortunately, this particular rotor on the older STX38 is different than the one I had from my newer one, because the newer one has a keyway in it. This one's splined all the way around, so I got to clean up the inside of these splines. I need to clean up the splines on the tractor to make sure everything slides in and out, and I'll go ahead and put this back together and adjust it. Alright, so we're back under here at the bottom on the transmission, and there's a little pocket in there that you put one of your brake shoes into. And then you take your rotor, and I have lubed this up. Pop your rotor on there. Make sure it travels nice and free in and out. And the brake shoe is keeping it away from the transfer case or the transmission. And then I have to put the front assembly over top of it. And let me get my tools together and show you how that goes. Okay, so I already put my brake pad in here on the inside. And as you can see, this thing has a notch in it to clear the rotor. I've got my 2 pins in there. We'll call them the pistons. Now my brake rod is right there. So that means this arm has to go on this way in order to be able to actually hit the brake. This is kind of a pain in the butt one-handed. So then that goes on there. It's like a retainer for the arm in case things get real loose. Then you got a washer. And you got your nut, and this is actually your adjustment in and out. Now I'm going to need to put this over underneath of that bolt, but I can't do that with one hand. Okay, so that's my brake assembly all put back together. I got my brake rod hooked back up, cotter pin through that, both of my bolts on that hold the caliper. And the way you adjust these systems is you just take a 13 millimeter and you bring this in until this doesn't wobble around a whole lot. And when you actually push on your brake, that's going down about 1.5 to 2 inches. You don't want it to lock up right away. This is mainly, and you can also set your parking brake with it. But that's the last thing I got to do. The brakes are good on this thing now. And I'm going to put this wheel back on. And this thing is pretty much wrapped up. Yeah, I started this video about a week ago and things got really busy. But this thing's back up and running. I already went out and made a little bit of a cut with it. And pulled it back in the garage. It's kind of muddy. I'm slipping all over the place. We've had rain, and finally it's starting to dry out a little bit. But this thing's taken care of, and now I'm going to get to trying to fix the steering on the old one out there so I can turn that into like a designated yard cart to haul our little mini trailers around with. But that's it for the new STX38. This is James from All Hail Internal Combustion. Like and subscribe. And hopefully we'll be doing some non-lawnmower and non-snowblower related repairs soon. Like back to the Ford. See y'all later.